I'm Elly. Today I'm going to read you a story. Grandparents' Day. Are you ready? Yeah. Ooh, Grandparents' Day. Wait a minute. Chapter 1. Getting know to you. It was Grandparents' Day at Plunkett Street. All the students had invited their grandparents to visit school. Miss Fazio was working hard to make sure her classroom was spick and span. Pens and pencils in your trays, bits of paper in the bin, books back on the shelf, bags away neatly. She pointed at all the directions, and Miss Fazio added with a loud double clap of hands. I want everyone to be on their best behavior. Awesome! Cried Nelson. Did you hear me, Nelson? Accused Miss Fazio, a little confused. Yes, miss, said Nelson with a big grin. Well then, said Miss Fazio, let's bring in our guests. She opened the classroom door and popped her head out into the hallway. Please come in, she said warmly. He's saying a bit awesome. Like that, I think he's saying. A line of nervous but curious grandparents scuffed into the classroom. Bruno's grandfather was so tall he almost hit his head on the door frame. Ming's grandmother was so small that she was only slightly bigger than Ming. Welcome to our wonderful class, announced Miss Fazio. We've been looking forward to your visit. Please take a few moments to say hello to each other and have a look around. The children have been working on lots of interesting things to show you. What did she say? Asked Rahib's grandfather loudly. Her mouth moved a lot, but I didn't catch a word. Rahib went red. Grandpa, do you have your hearing aid turned off again? Rahib reached and fiddled this side in his grandfather's ear. Suddenly, his grandfather's eyes lit up. That's better, he smiled. Leon's grandmother smothered him with kisses. Leon tried to squirm out of her python hug, but she only held him tighter. Bruno's grandfather admired the view of the window. Miles' grandfather found a sunny spot and read an old newspaper he had found in the art bin. Henny's grandmother laughed and pointed at the artwork on the classroom wall. Brooke and Beatrice's grandmothers whispered to each other as their granddaughters led them around the room. Ruby's grandfather refused to wear his glasses. I don't need them, he grumbled. He was bumping into everything, and Ruby had to tell him what he had collided with each time. Are you sure it's a chair, Rubes? It looks a lot like that flower pot I sat in last week. I don't want to end up with more spikes in my bottom. I'll get your glasses, sighed Ruby. Ooh. Nelson's grandfather seemed very uncomfortable. He squirmed in his seat. Just like Nelson, they silently squirmed next to each other. "Remember, children," said Miss Fazio, raising her voice up above the din. "This may be a good time to ask your grandparents what school was like when they were young." Heiny asked her grandmother what school had been like. The old woman smiled warmly and just laughed and laughed. Miles' grandfather had fallen asleep and was snoring to drown out his grandfather's snuffs and snorts. Miles started talking very loudly about the weather with Nelson. "Just ducking out for a minute," announced Miss Fazio. No one in the classroom took any notice that Miss Fazio left. They also didn't notice Ruby's grandfather lifted the lid of the frog tank at the back of the room. Why? Chapter 2. Break Out. Without his glasses, Ruby's grandfather didn't see the sign in bold red letters. "Attention! Life Cycle Project Tank. Live frogs inside. Do not remove lid without teacher's permission." He thought the frog tank was a bin. He let the lid drop into his dirty tissue and wandered away. No one saw the frogs escape from the tank, but soon later Nelson saw something fly through into the air and land in the perfect gray hair of Ming's grandmother. "Frog!" yelled Nelson, jumping out of his seat and pointing. Ming's grandmother wondered why a scruffy young boy was yelling and pointing at her. She reached up to pat her hair into place. She felt something good, something slimy, something moving. "Ah!" she screamed. "Get it off me! Get it off me!" Ha 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 ha. Yes. Ming grabbed the frog and Miles checked the tank. "All the frogs are missing escaped for bubbles," he cried. "And fasto," said Ming, returning to the frog. She had now tucked under her armpit, out of her sight. Heeny's grandmother laughed so much that Heeny wanted to hide too. "I see one," said Bruno's grandfather. Pointing under a table, he bent down to grab the animal. "Can you reach it, Grandpa?" asked Bruno. "No, I need a young person to do that," replied Bruno's grandfather. "Ow!" Bruno helped his grandfather to a chair next to Miles' grandfather, who was still snoring. "What do you call a woman with a frog on her head?" asked Bruno's grandfather. "Lily." Bruno's grandfather chuckled at his own joke as he scooped up the frog that had now leaped out onto Miles' sleeping grandfather. "That's Loopy," said Miles. Just then, his grandfather woke up. "Who are you calling Loopy, lad?" he growled. "This is Loopy," said Bruno, pointing to the frog in his grandfather's hands. Heeny's grandmother got the hiccups from her laughing. "Found another one," said Nelson's grandfather, scooping a frog out of Miss Fazio's pot plant. "That's Hoppy," said Nelson. Nelson's grandfather crept up behind Heeny's grandmother and surprised her with a loud Yeah, Hiccup's gone now. He smiled. He's very funny, isn't he? Chapter 3, Finding Flip-Flop. Here's Jumpy, said Holly, holding up another frog. She was on the bookshelf. Now we just have to find Flip-Flop, said Brooke and Beatrice together. He's my frog, cried Rahib. I raised him from a tadpole. We can't lose Flip-Flop. Don't worry, Rahib, we'll find him, said his grandfather. I just need everyone to be extra quiet. The classroom fell silent. Rahib's grandfather turned his hearing aid up as loud as it would go. He began to scan the room with his ears. He walked 2 steps towards the whiteboard. Can you hear him? Asked Rahib in a whisper. Shh, said his grandfather. He turned and walked 3 paces towards the back of the classroom. Is he close by? Whispered Rahib. Shh, repeated his grandfather. He edged his way slowly between the desks, turning his head from side to side. Suddenly his ears locked onto a sound. He quickly strode over to Ruby's grandfather, who was trying to sharpen a pencil. They don't make pencil sharpeners like they used to, sighed Ruby's grandfather. That's because it's a frog, gasped Ruby. Flip-Flop, cried Rahib. Ruby's grandfather had a firm hold of the frog. Its back legs were jerking and kicking, and in its mouth was a pencil. A frog? Really? Sorry about that, said Ruby's grandfather, hanging over Flip-Flop. Chapter 4, Best Behavior. All the frogs were returned to the frog tank, and Rahim made sure that the lid was on properly. After the excitement of the escaping frogs, everyone felt much more relaxed and friendly. Everyone carried on, except Leon's grandmother. Quiet, everyone, she boomed. Miss Fazio has something to say. Miss Fazio went slightly pink. Thank you, she smiled. I just want to let everyone know that morning tea is ready outside and there is cake. Cake! Cried the grandparents, and they all rushed to the door at once. The class stood back and watched their grandparents fill their mouths, laugh and talk. Some of them did all 3 at the same time. Ruby only just saved her grandfather from eating a plastic cup. Not a cupcake, he said, surprised. Ruby shook her head. Can you please wear your glasses now, Grandpa? She began. Nope, I don't need them, sweetie, he said, and Il bowed in to get some food. Yeah. Min watched the morning tea disappear before her eyes. Do you think they've been on their best behavior? She asked. Oh, believe me, sighed Ruby. Grandpa has definitely been on his best behavior. Mine too, added Nelson. You should have heard the stories of what he got up to when he was at school. I've got some great new ideas to try out here. Nelson's grandfather gave his grandson a hug, open-mouthed, smiled with a mouthful of cake. What am I, Nelson? What am I? He asked as crumbs flew over everywhere. A frog with a mouthful of food, laughed Nelson. Everyone joined in, even Miss Fazio, but no one laughed louder than Heeny's grandmother. Dad!